I see a great opportunity to reinvent DEI.
This is The Payoff with me, Sylvia Jeffries, thanks to Airbnb. Bianca, welcome to The Payoff.
Oh, lovely to be here. Thank you.
Look, we've got a lot of ground that we can cover with you because you bring such a wealth of knowledge and diversity of experience throughout your career. I just want to start with your most recent Financy Index, though. This is a great gauge on where women are at economically here in Australia. So what did your most recent index paint a picture of?
It painted a picture of surprising progress. And I'm saying surprising because 2024 was a really interesting year to look at from a gender lens perspective. So we've had progress over the course of the year. In a year that we saw started with WGEA and an onus on companies to were revealing their gender pay gap. So that was up front and centre at the start of 2024. So that basically set the scene for us to be more aware of gender pay gaps and things like that. The debate had shifted to what is this, to something is very much there and we're doing something more about it from a corporate sense. That was good. Then we kind of moved to these increasing cost of living pressures, and that is still around today, but that had a disproportionate impact on women. So even though I'm saying that progress has improved for 2024, we were hit by a few things, that being one of them. Then we've also had this increasing resistance, I'd call it, to gender equity, to diversity, equity and inclusion, and particularly with what we're seeing now around the Trump administration, the influence of that having on our shores. So there's been this cocktail of disruption, but it was led by a good start for 2024, which has really carried on and led to improved gender equity performance. I must say, though, the things that I've been most impressed by are simple things. So, yes, we've had improvement in the gender pay gap, a slight pullback at the start of this year, but genuinely we are headed in the right direction. Big tick. Unpaid work, so the amount of time men and women in relationships are spending on housework, on care, the juggle is very real, but we are seeing women continually doing less on the home front than ever before. Over the past 20 years, that's dropped about between nearly 10%. It's significant. Men, on the other hand, are not doing that much different, but we can see that for 2023, 2024, where we're at is that men are doing a little bit more on the home front. So this is good. We want the gap to close because what it does is it frees up women, girls in particular, and role modelling for girls and boys, how they see themselves, to change a little bit and to benefit the gender equity narrative as we progress. So on the whole, good. But there's work to be done. There always is.
So you exist on the front line of diversity, equality and inclusion here in Australia, DEI as they call it. As you point out, it's under attack basically in America. It's at the front line of their cost-cutting efforts over there under the Trump administration. Yep. What are you seeing in terms of the ripple effect here in Australia? Are you already seeing a ripple effect, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I see a great opportunity to reinvent DEI. And in many ways, what we've got here right now is DEI that and I spoke about it just a second ago, this resistance. This has been bubbling for a while. And I work with a lot of consultants on diversity, equity, inclusion and businesses from ASX listed to startups. And what's been missing for me when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion is too many people have been ignorant to this resistance, and maybe they felt that, we've had it this way for so long, we're going to push harder this way. I get that. But sometimes you've got to listen, and it's kind of we're at a point that's critical at the moment for DEI. I feel like we need a rebrand of DEI around getting to the roots of what it is. Fair and respectful workplaces is essentially what it is. But it must be, and we must really change things for corporates here, it must be linked to bottom line performance. So we need to start measuring, okay, we're going to do this on fair and equitable workplaces, but let's look at what that does relative to staff turnover. How does it reduce that? What does that do to productivity? What does that do to our innovation budget? How do we correlate these things to justify them? Because when we're up against resistance to any social impact change, we must be able to measure and showcase the evidence that it is making a difference. Because when we don't, well, we're open to this attack. And that's where I think we're finding ourselves increasingly now. We've had a real big pushback, and we tend to see this with historical social shifts. We go really far, then we pull back, and we go really far again. And I think we're in the midst of that right now. So it's forcing a reassessment of diversity, equity, and inclusion as we know it. In Australia, I think we'll see similar to the States, but I don't think we'll see as aggressive. It will hang a lot on what we see happen in this next election, though, as well.
So in your experience, is there evidence that DEI is good for the bottom line of an organisation?
Yes, definitely. Where the initiatives, and this is really critical, because you don't just hire a DEI expert or a DEI team and not have initiatives linked to bottom line performance. You really have to, especially today. But where teams can focus on, bringing in gender, for example, or more diverse opinions, or maybe even take that to the side at the moment, because that will probably open a can of worms. If we just look on those difference of opinions, there has been absolute research done showing that innovation tends to improve. Productivity, where it's linked to well-being, and the cultural idea that more opinions are being heard, listened to, respected, that tends to breed greater well-being at work and enhance productivity. That's where the links can be made to staff turnover and therefore reducing it. But you really need to make sure that the initiatives themselves aren't just about DEI social groups. They're about real targets. And they are linked to, staff turnover and things like that, or well-being, and then productivity as a result. That's where we tend to see the biggest correlations.
Yeah, like everything else, it has to prove that it's worth the investment.
Yes,
right?
It does.
So let's talk a bit about your career. You had a long career as a journalist working for the Fin Review, for the Financial Review here, which is now part of the Nine family. When did you decide to leave journalism and establish Financy?
Yeah, it's I don't know if I've ever really felt I've left. It's a funny thing. You're kind of stuck with it once you become a journalist. So I still write, but it's just a different type of focus. And that for me was a bit of a moment after my second daughter was born. And it's really around gender financial equity and trying to look deeper into the data, write about that data and see what narrative, how do I assist in changing the narrative when historically it's always been told with a particular gender lens. So my calling or my passion has been around looking at the data and then seeing how I can tell the story a little bit differently. And that's been going on for nearly 10 years now. And I still really enjoy it, but it's changing. It changes with the landscape. It's more social impact. It's more ESG related. It's more like how do we improve things for future generations as a whole, but certainly has its roots in financial literacy. I don't think I'll ever get away from it, and I think that's critical to where we go now on gender equity too. I still love it.
Have you noticed a change in financial literacy among women in Australia? Is there a shift going on in, say, the last decade in that space? I
think we've got more women than ever investing. I think when you look at Australian shareholder statistics and different investor statistics, it's showing that. So the appetite's there. You've got more influencers on social media than ever before. The social evidence is there, which is great. So I think that in itself is creating this shift. You've also got this feminisation of wealth that's happening. So of the $3.4 trillion that's set to change hands over the next decade in Australia, about 2/3 of that will go towards women through inheritances. This is huge. And I haven't seen technology really match that yet, really lean into what this feminisation of wealth story is going to look like. There's bits and pieces happening in the UK. The States kind of started going there, but I think with Trump it might pull back a bit. But you can't get away from this intergenerational wealth transfer and how that will affect, well, where are things going to be invested from here on in? How's that going to change? That's going to happen. So these new adjustments keep me forever kind of engaged in where things are going.
So what's the starting point when it comes to educating a woman about investment through your company? How do you begin that process with someone, with an individual?
Yeah. I think what's critical is mother statement of mine that's always been with me is you earn what you learn, and whether that manifests through your career or through your financial education and becoming an investor in the share market, in the property market, whatever it is, you need to be educated in the sense of what you're getting into, what the risks are. And I think that's where it starts fundamentally, is this education and the awareness that it is within your power to make these investments. You don't need to wait for Mr. Right to come along. And I saw this great stat that was out today just looking at the increasing number of, there's less and less women all the time choosing to have kids later in life and different things like that and pursue different careers paths. That said, we know that there is still a lack of women in key fundamental leadership positions, so we're certainly not there yet, even though we've had a good year in 2024 with critical leadership positions taken. It's just that education and awareness and then the action, not being afraid to take action to invest, even though, I've got to say that it's daunting. I look back 20 years ago when I could have invested in this property, that property, and the price of things. I mean, we might all say, hey, it's relative to inflation and different things, but is it really? It certainly feels a lot steeper for young people right now. But what we do have right now are these bite-sized chunks, the ability, to invest in different shares and just think differently about the way we get into property, that I think is an opportunity for younger people today. I get contacted a lot too by people who I wrote an article some time ago last year about FIRE, so that freedom to financially retire early. There are so many young people on that journey who are set to retire mid-30s, early 40s. Yes, there might only be, relative to the huge population, a small proportion, but it's really interesting that this is a thing, that there are young people that are actively looking at, okay, well, I can't afford to buy in Sydney. Where can I afford to buy property, for example? What does my share portfolio look like if I start early? So the benefits of starting early are significant. If you've missed the boat for that, unfortunately, the reality is most of us are going to have to work till we're at least 70. Try to make the most of it, and education really never stops.
That's an interesting point about starting early, and I think a lot of people in their, let's say, late 30s, early 40s, probably hear that advice and think, oh, well, I've missed the boat. What do I do now? Is it too late to get started if you're 39? In sort of regular investing in, say, ETFs or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever too late. I think you just need to look at what you've got to work with and how much risk you're prepared to stomach. And that it's that grand old tale. Don't invest what you can't afford to lose, but start somewhere with it, and maybe think differently about the way you resource it. I know over my career, we've lived. My partner and I have lived with friends. We've lived with family when we've subdivided properties and different things like that. It's about thinking about, well, how can I resource this differently to fund the ultimate goal? And unfortunately, with cost of living pressures being what they are, we have to think like that. I even think that with my own children. We've got this parcel of land. Am I going to be able to divvy that up 3 ways? What can I do to assist them when the time comes? So I don't think it's too late to start. I do think it's critical to start and to think differently about how you will resource it to get that way.
Okay, what about property? You say, some people are having success in buying not in the city that they live in. What other ways are people finding success in terms of entering the property market in untraditional ways?
Yeah. I like, and this is a little bit controversial, but I like investing in property with a view to subdivide it. I like having a little bit of a developer hat on me and thinking about, well, how could I do this myself? And I have done that myself, is buying property with the view to subdivide it and essentially it's contributing to the property market, and you're essentially buying property that you hope to eventually sell that same block of property for what you paid for the one. So it's thinking a little bit differently about what you could potentially do. To do things like that, you're more than likely going to have to look outside of town, outside of where you are. Where are you prepared to go? So, I mean, I love property, and I love thinking about, where could I be? What where can I go? Where's the next big thing? Where I'm based is Northern Rivers, so up Byron, Tweed region, and the growth there over the past year, I think, is up around nearly 30% growth. And if I'd invested a couple of years back in one particular region, which I'll say is known locally as a dodgy part, wow, property, that's where I should have bought. So not being afraid.
Hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So thinking a little bit differently about the dodgy parts. Will they always stay dodgy? Let's think about different places that were like that in Sydney. So just lifting the lid on our thinking about where we're prepared to go to seize that opportunity, I think, is important.
I'm really interested to pick your brain on artificial intelligence. This is a massive disruptor, obviously, in the jobs market, in employment, and in how we live our lives and how we approach our jobs these days. Where are the biggest disruptors that you're seeing? Which jobs are most at risk, I suppose, from AI?
Yeah, I think it's the jobs that are all too easy to be replaced. Like I use AI for my personal assistants now. I use AI for researching complex documents, annual reports and things that I can literally put into certain engines and get out big summaries. And I've tested this with the way I'd summarize them and the way they come out. And I'm essentially getting a pretty close report that I might have assessed myself in minutes.
Yeah. I
don't even think minutes is correct. I think I'm talking seconds. How do you compete with that?
And how long would it normally take you to digest something
days.
like that? Yeah.
Days, absolutely. For me, it's particularly in my line of work, because I do a lot of communication strategy as well, we're increasingly using AI to do processes that are done in seconds that were done over days and weeks, just to get us to the starting blocks so we can scale businesses, scale strategies for clients so much quicker and focus on the real guts, the real engagement pieces to add what we hope is superior value to clients. And I'm seeing a lot of tech companies do this as well. It's around using AI where you can to simplify those processes, to be able to add that greater value, greater depth, greater customer service experience to the end client that the human touch gives better than AI still at this point in time.
So there are clear benefits to embracing AI.
I think so. There's clear dangers too, but there's clear benefits. And I think we're just going to keep seeing that and keep tinkering with it. And, that said, have I looked really deeply in it, deep seek? At this point in time, no.
Yeah.
I'm still playing catch up on things like that. But it's, Google LM, Notebook LM, ChatGPT, different platforms like Sintra AI and the way you use things like that. And then even a lot of the graduates coming out of university today, being able to, I'm seeing a lot of people plucking those people out of university to build processes that much quicker for them, around the marketing play or around tech plays, aggregating content information. I don't think you can replace a journalist yet, but I think you can get
not.
I think you can get the starting blocks there to start crafting.
Yeah.
From a careers perspective, I think there's a risk in using AI to a little bit too much. I think, and I'm seeing a lot of people on social media talk about how they don't even get a look in because the AI bots are screening them out. So we almost need to get smarter in the way we position our resumes, if that's the case, so that the AI bots, which are increasingly being used, can pick up on those keywords. It's like your resume is your new website. It's got to be so SEO friendly, keyword friendly, that AI picks that up as well to give you the front foot when you're going for a job as well.
Ultimately, we still have to use critical thinking when we're assessing something that ChatGPT, for example, has delivered to us if we're asking them a question about something.
Definitely.
So you don't just take it as fact because they're drawing on what exists on the internet, right? And that's not always accurate. And I'm finding this. I'm starting to play around with it a little bit because I'm happy to admit I'm afraid of it to an extent because I'm worried that if I don't embrace it, for the first time in my life, I'm going to be left behind by technology. I came up in the social media age, so I adopted that easily and happily and freely. AI seems like a whole new world to me. So if there are other people out there feeling that way and worried about how to get into it and how to apply it to their lives, what would be your advice? Where do you start with AI?
Yeah, I would start with platforms like ChatGPT or Notebook LM for Google Gemini, something like that. And I would use it to do little queries. Essentially, what you've got are platforms that are replacing Google, the need to search. You can ask it to scan the web. Where I think there is this hesitancy is if you wouldn't go dump your whole resume in there because it's essentially going to use all that information to put you back in the sphere and be we don't know how that data is going to be used. So I'd be a little bit, if you are a little bit conscious about it, afraid, whatever you want to call it, I'd be a little bit mindful of what information I put into these engines. That's personal. So cut that kind of information out and kind of treat it as this third person speak in order to do your research. But I think you'll find that it can do the smaller tasks if you start to set it towards little things, and it'll blow your mind with what it can do so quickly. I would just be conscious of how much personal information you give it. That said, when you're in the media like yourself, that it's out there. It's just another way of getting it out there.
Too much information is out there.
It is, yeah.
So, okay, I suppose a lot of this is about let me start that again. A lot of this is all about future-proofing our careers against whatever may come our way, not just AI. So what's your advice to people about future-proofing and maybe some of the common pitfalls that you see in that area?
I think education is absolutely critical, and I mean, I've started my MBA. I'm like back into the throes of it again. I don't think you ever really stop learning, whether that's learning on the job or whether that's learning back at university or more formal places. For me, it's all about how much can I get into this brain while I'm alive so I can keep learning. It's like my own AI engine. What can I give it so I can keep improving? And I think that is critical. We know that women tend to study more than men. Unfortunately, once we get out of the workforce, life happens, and even though the birth rate is continuously dropping in Australia, there is these challenges that still see women hold disproportionately less leadership positions. That affects pay outcomes, and the rest is history at the moment. But my hope is if we continue to keep pushing the boundaries with our own education, but pursuing more managerial positions, not just, and by and large, women are still, pursuing careers in society and culture studies, health and education. The careers that by and large give us flexibility, which is great. But, once you're in those, okay, well, where do I go? Add a layer of business administration, add managerial. We need to kind of keep pushing those boundaries. So at least it's there. I think education is critical in advancing oneself, regardless of gender. What we tend to find too is the way you sell yourself is a big one. Men are much better, research shows, at selling the passion, and so getting greater buy-in at the investor table. We know that with startups, venture capital, they'll get it because they're selling this vision predominantly to male investors, but they're selling it and they're successful at it overall. That's the challenge for women, is being able to sell that passion but be seen to be, okay, that's someone I want to invest in. And unfortunately, what we tend to be seen as, that's someone who's just a bit too bossy. I don't know if she's got it. So there's still those social stereotype challenges that we've got to push the barrier on and, challenge ourselves regardless of gender about, well, what is my unconscious bias here? That's an education unto itself.
Gen Zs in particular and millennials are a really interesting demographic to look at in this case because a lot of them simply will not buy into those stereotypes and won't accept that traditional workplace kind of culture either. I mean, I know people who are making really good money curating other people's OnlyFans accounts. So why would you go and work 9 to 5 for less money, get flogged and treated poorly based on your gender? Do you see a shift, like a sustainable long-term shift in that sense, or is this a bit of a flash in the pan moment, that kind of trajectory?
I think it's difficult to stop progress, and where there's a will to find a way, it's a cliche to say, but there is a way. And younger people today don't have to work the Dolly Parton 9 to 5 slog. They can find another way, and there are other alternatives. And I think for as long as that is enabled, so long as AI enables that ability, that will always be, and that will increasingly be. And I think that's actually a really good thing. I don't think this push by many corporates to get back into the office 4 days a week and still call it hybrid is really supportive one of gender equity for men and women. I think we need to be able to have workplaces that have greater accountability measures or greater systems in place. If they're seriously worried about, whether the work's getting done, we'll put the processes in place to ensure that it is getting done and stop the argument there. But so I think we will continue to see more traditional hybrids, but only in the sense that it's a hybrid Australian workplace culture because there are so many people that do not have to come to the workplace. I don't think that's going away. As much as the Donald Trumps of the world would like to think that we're all going to go back to the office, I just don't think that will happen for future generations.
Because young employees will walk, right, and go and find flexibility elsewhere.
They will build their own technology. We will find other ways.
Yeah, they won't even look for a new employer. They'll just build their own business.
It's just a different way. We can't eliminate that. That's not a very real possibility. So if we're going to keep fighting it, what are we really? Why are we fighting that? We're kind of forcing this narrative down another path if we don't start embracing it. And especially there's a drift of talent that we could be missing, that corporates are particularly missing out on if they don't recognise that younger generations are wanting something a little bit different.
If a young employee is having trouble convincing their boss of the benefits of them having more of a realistic hybrid and genuine hybrid situation of working from home and working in the office, how would you advise them to approach that conversation with their boss? How could they convince their boss that it is good for the business?
Yeah, I think at its very basic level, there are enough programs. There's Slack and all these different programs you can work on remotely. And it's about accountability and being able to have key deliverables at the end of the day. When you're a journalist, what you're filing, your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories a day, whatever it is and how much you can get out. So what are your deadlines? It's about approaching those conversations with, I'd like to work here. You're not really needing me in the office. I'm not, for example, an on-site plumber or something that someone's got to actually be there. So if I can do the office outside, here's how I'm going to do it, and setting you clear measurables and targets and selling it in that way. There are some jobs that you actually have to be there. You've got to meet with the client, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately. So it's the career decisions that have to be made. Do I want to be front facing, or do I need to be front facing every single day? And if it is a particular role where you don't need to be, then sell in how you're going to make it happen.
How important is LinkedIn in your view? I mean, I know I use Instagram a lot. I sort of sometimes play around with LinkedIn.
Yeah.
How crucial is it to the future of your career?
I find LinkedIn really important. It's from a B2B selling position in particular. I think Facebook, Instagram and a lot of other emerging social media platforms. I try to stay away from Twitter these days. But a lot of those are more of a B2C play in getting. But from a B2B, I think LinkedIn and building those networks is really important. And building people and communities that are, pushing the boundaries on tech and where are those groups, where are those professionals situated, I think LinkedIn is really important. It always surprises me that not everyone uses LinkedIn for that professional networking, and I think it's a real opportunity actually.
There's a big trend going online at the moment about meeting your 15-year-old self for a coffee and having a conversation with your 15-year-old self and passing on some advice. Let's say it's your 20-year-old self. What would you advise your 20-year-old self professionally and also financially?
I definitely would not have bought the first car.
Yeah.
And when I did buy that first car, I wouldn't have prioritised paying off that debt over buying a property. I would have really focused on the bigger assets first and gone hard at that without a shadow of a doubt and made the most of leverage. That would be my big thing.
What was the first car?
It was a Mitsubishi Lancer,
Nice.
and I loved it.
Yeah.
But it was, did I need to pay that off as fast as I did? No, I didn't. But that was kind of old school thinking that was drummed into me, that you don't have debt, that all debt is bad. Well, I'd be saying to myself, not all debt is bad. It's what you do with it. It's how you leverage it. So let's work towards leveraging it, and don't be afraid. Everyone talks about this overnight test and do you feel sick? I like to think about that. If I don't actually feel a little bit sick, then I'm not really living. My father died at the end of last year, and he was always notoriously conservative with the way he invested. But towards the end of his time here on this earth, he became really kind of like, just buy it, just do it. And I love that thinking. I was always leaning more towards that, and that really came out in him in the end. And I think we need to think more about, well, what can I do here and now? So it's that little overnight test of feeling a little bit sick. I'm prepared to live with that for a longer term gain. Than I'm to not experience that at all is not really where it's at for me. So lean into it is what I'd say. Yeah.
A few of our guests have spoken about automated investments. So every month, rather than waiting to see what's left over at the end of the month, proactively sending some money at the start of the month, as soon as the pay lands in your account, into the stock market, whichever way you choose to do that. Is that something you adhere to?
I like investing in the stock market, preferably in blue chip stocks, because my other ventures haven't really paid off for me. But it's I think that's a smart thing to do, because once it's out and it's gone, then you're at less risk of spending it basically on all the other temptations there are. And there are increasingly temptations. This cost of living crisis, I just paid nearly $30 for literally my smashed avo on toast. And I thought to myself, I am absolutely jack of paying for things that from restaurants or different places where the service does not match what it is. I think Australia has got to a point where we are so used to paying and copying these extra charges without questioning, should we? And I actually sent that piece of toast back because it actually wasn't cooked. And it sounds probably a bit fussy, but I thought, who wants to be paying that continually and adding to the inflationary price of things that we're not actually delivering on the service offering that we should be? So, yeah, I'm kind of digressing a little bit here, but if you can invest first before you start spending on your $30 smashed avo on toast, I think it's a really good way of thinking.
Just to finish off, I'd love to get your take on where younger generations in Australia are at and what gives you some hope for their future, what you see about their approach to work, their approach to lifestyle, their approach to investment and personal finance. Where are the green shoots and the positive signs?
Yeah, for younger people, I tend to think of my kids and where they're at. Obviously, the younger generations are so technically savvy that technology will play a huge role in whatever career path they go down, because they have to be on. Unfortunately, with the risk of being always on in today's society is you never really get a break. You never really get that mental download and away time that we grew up with that was actually such a privilege now when I think about it. I think the opportunities for them, however, are in thinking, how do we thinking, how do they push the boundaries of technology? How do they use it with AI to make things faster, to do things better, to work in a way that they want to work? I think this is really important for future generations as to where they go. And I think it also will force many of us to stay on our toes about the way, how do we attract these younger generations into the workforce? How do we make it lucrative for them? And where does the future workforce go? I think these are really important things that we need to be thinking of ourselves, but also be supportive of them in how they use technology. It's easy to criticise kids for being on the technology that we provide them. But if we can think about a way in instilling certain rules and parameters around that, and just making them think a little bit differently about how they use it, how they push the boundaries of simplicity, ChatGPT, for example, how they use this technology. And I think schools are trying to do this, how they use the technology to do things better, processes better, and to use that in business. I think that is an optimistic way to look at society and how we can advance in a progressive front. I'm a social impact advocate. I'd like to think that we can support girls to be in greater leadership positions. I like to think that we won't completely ditch paper straws and things like that for climate change.
It's bizarre to me. It's bizarre to me that that's a conversation that we're having.
Yeah, it's very back in time. And I think a lot of young people are going, what? I'm just, why would I want to swim with all those plastic straws again? Which really is a reality.
It really doesn't make our lives that much harder to have a paper straw. It doesn't.
It doesn't. and really, do we want kids to be thinking that's okay? Like, we're just going to come full circle again. I think certain progress has been made to backpedal. Just to me, screams of a 70-year-old man who hasn't lived in a 7-year-old's shoes. And I think we need to think about, well, where is the future? I get some people don't see climate change as being a thing. I get all these things, but there are certain effects on the world in which we live that are difficult to ignore. And, I think paper straws is an easier win.
And we have to, not just environmentally, but economically think about what we're leaving behind for future generations.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Bianca, great to chat to you. Thank you so much for giving us some time.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.